Well, joining us now, Ambassador Pankaj. Saran, thanks very much, sir, for being with us.
Thank you.
As a former Deputy National Security Advisor, you'd be able to answer my next question in a great amount of detail. I suggest that you won't, or perhaps you won't, but I think in broader terms, could you explain to our viewers why intelligence sharing between India and the United States is absolutely critical?
Yeah, thank you, Vishnu. Intelligence sharing between two friendly countries happens only when you reach a certain level of trust between them. It doesn't normally happen otherwise. So it's critical because you either face common threats internally within your own countries, or you face threats in your sub-regions, or you face threats globally. And these threats can range from being traditional, hybrid, non-traditional, such as terrorism, such as migration, such as even, of course, you talk about nuclear safety, nuclear security. In this context, I think the intelligence sharing framework for India and the US straddles all its dimensions. It peaks, or rather it ratchets up at the time of a crisis, such as the Galwan, in 2020, when we had the clashes with the Chinese. There was intelligence sharing because we needed it. Or if you're faced with a terror attack, you have to escalate your levels of sharing. Or in a normal course, when you're dealing with systemic structural challenges, such as in the Indo-Pacific, through the maritime domain, through the underwater seas, you need to also have friends who can help you to enhance your comprehensive power to deal with threats. Say, for example, how China behaves, what's the intention, what's the capacity. So it's a whole set of issues, I think, where intelligence sharing becomes critical. We have to separate the urgent and emergent and emergency situations from a more systemic manner of sharing. Now, if we remember that the post of the DNI itself in the United States was created after the 9/11 attacks, and it was set up in 2004, and it was also part of their own intelligence reform. We've had our own Cargill war, we've had our own 26/11, we've had our own intelligence reforms. So in any country, particularly in a democracy, intelligence, the capacity to gather, the capacity to provide the information that policymakers need is absolutely critical, especially if you want to avoid traditional wars and if you want to win a war without fighting a war. So the quality in terms of human resources, in terms of technical capabilities, whether it is space-based or intelligence or electronic, there are a whole set of measures to gather the intelligence become very, very important. So one is just getting the raw intelligence. The other is interpreting it. And then, of course, as I said, the last stage is when you begin to share the intelligence. It's the last phase in a progressively iterative process where you develop the confidence and the trust in each other. And I may add that even then, there are limits to what partners and friends normally share with each other, unless you are military allies. And of course, we are not an ally of any country or any bloc, which puts us at a disadvantage if that's the way you want to interpret it. But still, I mean, we do have such sharing arrangements, even with other countries.
Yeah. Ambassador Saran, it's not been easy getting to where we are with the United States. There were the foundational agreements negotiated over a period of a decade. There was a great deal of trepidation over in New Delhi. We were worried about whether we were getting too close to the Americans, what that would necessarily mean, end-use monitoring of surveillance aircraft, potentially weapon systems as well. But we've gone past that. There's real-time sharing of intelligence as well. There is encrypted communications, which is now a reality. Our systems talk to their systems as well. Could you tell us where we were, let's say, 20 years back and where we are now in terms of that close link that exists from an intelligence standpoint?
No, we've traveled a long distance. I mean, as I mentioned, during the Cargill War, there was intelligence sharing. During 2611, we had quite a lot of intelligence sharing and cooperation among the law enforcement agencies. But so we've gone a far way, as I said. Now, in the last 1 or 2 years, the other areas of interest are those relating to underwater domain awareness, relating to the use of space-based intelligence, encryption. So we have moved a long way. But when you talk about the foundational agreements, that's more to do with military and defense interoperability, not so much classical intelligence sharing. And all those set of agreements were basically meant to bring about greater synergy between the defense establishments, which was not strictly intelligence, but it was a separate sphere of activity, and also to enable the United States to supply platforms to India. Those agreements also provided for other forms of defense cooperation, military cooperation, such as logistics, etc. So the reason they were not signed for so many years was, of course, a negotiation between the technical people, but also political from our point of view. Yeah. So it was the Modi government which actually took the political decision to sign. And the signing of those has helped, and it has paved the way for so much of the defense acquisition that we have witnessed from the United States, which is a sea change from where we began, let's say in 2005 or 2008, because till then we were under US sanctions. I mean, we did not have that availability. But in these last 15 years, once the US itself realized that its policies to India were not helping itself, that's when the first acquisitions began in 2008 and 10. And today we moved a long way. But having said all that, we are still far away from interoperability. That is something which is typically an alliance state of affairs. We are not an alliance partner. We are not an ally. So we are trying to get there, but both sides have concerns. I mean, because we have platforms from different countries, different technologies. All of those partners also are worried about technology security, just as the United States is. So we are making the progress, and it's good, but the only thing is we should do it on our terms,
sure,
which suit us.
All right, wonderful speaking to you, Ambassador Saran. Thank you very much. In running us through that close intelligence equation which exists and has been building between the two nations. I'm now joined by Carle. He's a former Deputy National Intelligence Officer for transnational threats at the CIA. He's tracked various aspects of this relationship. Thanks, sir, very much for being with us. I think there was a sense of worry here in New Delhi that, what was Trump going to bring to the relationship? And on the basis of, my conversation with Tulsi Gabbard today and what we've seen in terms of how Modi has interacted with Trump, it does appear that that basic foundation of that strategic relationship is extremely secure, perhaps even more secure than what America has with some of its closest allies elsewhere.
Well, certainly Tulsi Gabbard was on her best behavior to be a successful diplomat in her discussion with you, and I'm sure with the officials in Delhi and in India. And I think that is a function of all roads leading to Beijing almost, really, that India is critical to the United States, and the United States could be critical to India because of the rise of China. And importantly, the historic change in strategic international approach that Donald Trump has initiated, which is truly a withdrawal from many multilateral fora, traditional alliances, and a seeking of bilateral relationships at the in place of, it appears, the traditional multilateral ones. So she had every reason to make nice as well as best she could. And she did well. She did well.
Tell us a little bit about where you see the relationship between Washington and Beijing. I understand that the United States' primary security concerns are now in the Asia-Pacific region, the Pacific region. Do you see India being a natural partner there, or do you see a greater sense of optimism at Washington being able to mend fences with Beijing?
Well, I think from the geostrategic perspective, India is the natural partner of the United States and vice versa, just given the fact that there are, four great, one, two, three, perhaps five great world powers that exist or are emerging. And one will always look to counterbalance with one ally or power, the relations with another. So India is as India becomes a superpower, it is natural for the United States to seek to leverage a relationship. One hopes not at the expense of, but certainly because of Beijing's rise. So, and the same is true for India. So I think this 20-year slow but steady progression between India and the United States into if not an alliance, as the gentleman before said, certainly a de facto one, I think, that will continue. Now, Trump has made, as he does on most subjects, contradictory statements and seems to have contradictory objectives towards Beijing. He is concerned about the trade imbalance and of tariffs that he claims to like, clearly seems to like, and at the same time doesn't seem to have the same strategic concerns concerning allies, which would be Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, as Americans historically have. So it's early days. But it's all about bilateral advantage from Washington's perspective, from Trump's perspective, and that would argue strongly in favor of trying to overcome with India the points of friction, which almost exclusively are on tariffs and trade.
All right, then, Carle, great speaking to you. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us.